Howdy. I have to tell you, I was really scared when I found out I got the job here because I thought I could never embrace the howdy, but I was so wrong. Love the howdy. Okay, so I want to start with what I think is a relatively non-controversial premise, and that premise is that we all have questions that we have to find our own answer to in our life. And one of those questions is, who am I? As Alice says here, it's really the great puzzle. And because I pay attention to this kind of thing because of the type of work that I do, I feel like I rarely go a day without hearing someone make reference to their efforts to try to solve this puzzle, or feeling like they haven't solved the puzzle, but trying to find that answer to the question, who am I, right? And people take a lot of lengths to try to spur self-discovery journeys, right? They might go backpacking through Europe. They might take drugs. They might do silly quizzes on Facebook that tell them what Harry Potter character they're like. But all of those things, I think, are driven by this thirst, this desire for self-knowledge. And similarly, when people reflect on really pivotal moments in their life, I think you'll often find that they contain this self-discovery element. So when I took that class, that's when I knew who I was. Or when I read that book, that's when I knew who I was. Or when I had my first child, that's when I knew. So that's the first question. The second question that I'm interested in is, how should I live my life? I think it's another one of these big existential questions that we all have to grapple with at some point. And similarly, we see people looking for answers to this question in all kinds of places. People look to self-help books. They pay lots of money to go to self-help seminars taught by motivational speakers. People consult therapists. They consult religious texts or religious leaders. They might seek advice from trusted family or friends. But what our research shows is that over and above all of these sources, really the answer to that second question, how should I live my life, is inextricably tied to the answer to the first question, who am I? And so when people are trying to make major decisions in their life, they really consult their true self like a compass. The same way that a sailor might consult a compass to navigate the ocean, we think people consult the self as a compass as they try to navigate the waters of their own life. And we think that what they're looking for when they're making these choices is the choice that best creates an overlap between who they are and the possibilities. Right? So when you're picking a career, what career should you choose? It's the one that allows you to express who you are. When you're trying to pick a partner, who should it be? It should be the person who knows and expresses and appreciates who you are. And I think this is related to the theme of TED this year, of pioneering change, because when people are trying to pioneer personal change in their life, I think it's often spurred by this feeling that life has somehow gotten off course, that I've lost sight of my compass, and I need to steer it back towards the way that I want it to be. I want it to be consistent with who I am. And the movie Jerry Maguire, although it's a little bit trite perhaps, but you have to love it because it's Cameron Crowe, provides a really great example of this actually. So in case it's been a while since you've seen it or you've never seen it, in Jerry Maguire, our protagonist, Jerry, is a sports agent that's at the top of his game. So he works at a great firm, he works with big names, he's got financial success. Really from the outside, it seems like he has it all, and he even feels like he has it all. Until he has this kind of epiphany, this self-discovery moment where he realizes, maybe this isn't who I am. And he stays up all night and he writes this manifesto about how he would like to see the firm change. And in that manifesto is this really telling quote. How can we do something surprising and memorable with our lives? How can we run this job in small but important ways into a better representation of ourselves? And so I think that's a sentiment that a lot of us can relate to if we ever felt like we wanted to change something about our lives. And so in our lab, we refer to this kind of thinking as the true self as guide lay theory of decision making. And so I use the word lay theory here to refer to a working model held by non-experts. So people who are non-experts in decision making, what do they think is the best way to make decisions in their lives? And again, I'm suggesting that one of the prominent, widespread lay theories is that you should follow your true self. And I don't think this just from these anecdotal observations or from watching Hollywood movies. I believe this because we've asked people, and we've asked a number of different people, a number of different samples from different places, different ages, and I'll just show you one example of the typical distribution that we get. So we asked people to tell us, how much do you agree that following your true self is likely to lead to a satisfying decision? Okay, there's a number of different questions, but that's just one example. And what we find is on a 1 to 7 scale, where 7 is strongly agree, almost everybody is somewhere between 5 and 7. So that means almost everybody is somewhere between agree and strongly agree. We have very few people even below the midpoint, and really nobody who's expressing disagreement. Nobody's saying, I strongly disagree with that idea, that you should follow who you are. And I think this is actually kind of compelling, right? Because when we look out into society, especially right now during these election times, there seem to be so few things that we can agree on. It can be maddening, the extent to which we can't agree, but this seems to be something that we can all get behind. And interestingly, we have data from a few different cultures now that shows the same kind of pattern. So not only do people agree with this at high levels, they agree with it at levels that are as high, if not higher, than all the other predominant kind of decision-making lay theories that we've asked them about. And so here you can see the sort of average rating of agreement for different ways that you might make decisions and how good of an idea or how important it is to use those strategies. And what we find is that the true self really always comes out at the top. And it's rated as important as considering your future self, which makes sense, right? Because your future self will be experiencing the consequences of the decisions you make today, and your future self is still you, right? So it's still certainly related to this idea. But people also think the true self is as important as careful thought. It's as important as what we call rational thinking. They think it's and then they think it's more important statistically than anything else that we've asked about. So it's more important to follow your true self than to follow who you ideally wish that you could be, or how you actually act in your everyday life. What you're supposed to follow is, again, this inner true self that's hiding in there. It's more important than considering how your decision will influence other people or following your gut and using intuition. And again, when we actually administer this in other cultures, the relative ranking of some of these move around. So, for example, when you get into Eastern cultures, people think you should really pay attention to the influence you're going to have on other people. But we consistently find that the true self still stays near the top. I wouldn't use the word universal. We don't have every culture by any means, but we have yet to find an example where it doesn't roughly follow that pattern. So I think this is interesting from a descriptive kind of place, but as a social psychologist, I'm really interested in the downstream consequences of this lay theory. So what does it mean for our lives that we hold this idea? And so if you think the key to how you should live your life is hidden in who you are, that's going to put a really big premium on having a really good answer to that first question, right? And that's how you end up with statements like, find your true self, find who you are. In fact, some might even say it should be your first, big letters, priority. Because how can you do anything else if you don't know who you are? How can you make any decisions without that knowledge? So that led us to a testable hypothesis that feeling like you know who you are should be a predictor of how satisfied you are with your decisions, right? Because if I'm not feeling like I know who I am, how can I be sure that I'm supposed to be a psychologist or that being a psychologist is good for me, right? Maybe I should have gone to law school or become an organic farmer or whatever. Like, how can I be sure that this was a good path for me? And so we think that when people are feeling like they know who they are, they're going to be able to feel more confident in their choices, right? Because they have the compass and they know how to read the compass. Okay? And so we've studied this correlationally, experimentally. First, I'll show you a correlation done with undergraduates here at Texas A&M, where we had them tell us how much they thought they knew about their true selves, and then they told us how satisfied they were with some major decisions they had made in their life. And these were undergraduates here at Texas A&M, so we said, how happy are you that you came to A&M? How satisfied are you with your current major? Things that were relevant to the sample. And we found this significant positive correlation. So as feelings of self-knowledge go up, so does decision satisfaction. And I realize this might not be the single most compelling figure you've ever seen in your life. It's, to be fair, a moderate correlation. But when you're trying to predict something as complicated as decision satisfaction, that undoubtedly has other predictors too, I'm not suggesting it's the only predictor, we were pretty interested to see this pattern. And then perhaps more compelling than correlational data to me is experimental data. So we'll bring people into the lab, and we have ways of experimentally manipulating the feeling that you know who you really are. I won't get into the details right now, but you come into the lab, you're randomly assigned to a condition where you go through an experiment, and by the end of it, you're feeling pretty confident that you know who you are, or you're starting to question whether you know who you are. And then we ask you how satisfied you are with your major decisions that you've made in your life. And we find this pattern. So again, people randomly assigned to go through this high true self-knowledge condition, they're feeling more satisfied with their decisions than people who we've threatened their self-knowledge through this experimental manipulation. And we think when you spread this kind of effect across all the decisions that a person makes in their life, we think that true self-knowledge might be able to enrich your entire life with meaning. Right? If your career feels more meaningful and your relationship feels more meaningful and you feel like you've made the right choices, then you might respond positively to statements like this. So these are established measures of meaning in life that we've seen if true self-knowledge predicts these, again, both correlationally and experimentally. I'll show you an experiment where, again, we manipulate feelings of true self-knowledge, and we find that if you go through the high true self-knowledge experience, then you subsequently tell us that your life makes more sense to you, it feels like it has more meaning than if you went through that low true self-knowledge experience. And just in case you're worried, we debrief them, and by the time they're gone, that effect has disappeared, but we get it for a short period of time there. All right, so far I've talked about what I think of as one piece of the puzzle, which is feeling like you know how to read the compass. Right? But that's not necessarily the same as feeling like you actually used the compass, right? Maybe it was in your pocket when you got to that fork in the road and you didn't pay attention to what you were supposed to. And so we've also studied whether feeling like you followed your true self does actually produce similar effects and lead you to be more satisfied with your decisions. Again, we found this in a number of samples, correlationally, experimentally. I'll talk about one experiment that I like, where we brought people into the lab and we had them do these decision-making tasks. And before they do the task, we either tell them, when you make these choices, use your true self. Or we tell them, use rational thinking. Just think carefully, really weigh the pros and cons. Okay? Then they do these career choices, and they see a whole bunch of different random pairs of careers. And so they're saying, would you rather be a chemist? Would you rather be a dancer? Would you rather be a psychologist or an economist? So they're going through, they're making all of these choices, thinking about what kind of career is right for them. And then at the end of each task, we ask them how satisfied they are with their choices. And what we find is that when people are instructed to use their true self on the task, they are more satisfied than if they were instructed to think carefully. They're also more satisfied if they use their true self compared to if they follow their gut and use intuition. And there's a smaller effect size here, but they're also even a little bit more satisfied if they follow their true self versus if they follow who they ideally want to be, their best version of themselves that they wish they could be. And so I have one last argument to make here. So I think true selves are important. I think they matter because they can help you feel more satisfied. They can enrich your life with meaning. But I'm going to suggest that they can maybe even help you accomplish your goals. And so this is a study where we followed undergraduate students for the course of a semester, and we checked in with them multiple times throughout the semester and asked them, how motivated are you to be a good student? And this figure I'm about to show you will be of no shock to anyone who has ever been a student or is currently a student or has ever taught students. Academic motivation goes down over the course of the semester. So by the end of the semester, students in general are feeling less motivated than they were at the beginning of the semester. However, this decline in motivation all but disappears for people who self-reported that they are really confident that they know who they are. So this blue bar is people at the top of the distribution, near the top of the distribution, who feel very confident that they know who they are. This orange line is people who are lower in the distribution, who feel less confident that they know who they are. And what you can see is that our high true self-knowledge folks are better able to maintain their motivation over the course of the semester. And we think that's because they're not experiencing decision dissatisfaction. They're better able to see the purpose and what they're doing, and that keeps them motivated. And certainly when you're more motivated to achieve your goals, it doesn't mean that you will, but it doesn't hurt. It certainly helps to be motivated to achieve your goals. So in conclusion, let me just say I have no data that suggests that true selves literally exist. In fact, I call myself a true self agnostic. I don't know whether they're literally a real thing, but I know that people have beliefs about the true selves that make them really important. And so I think it's impossible to deny that your true self matters and can do these things for you. And so I'll leave you with this advice, that if you just trust yourself, then you will know how to live. Thank you.